I was standing in my Denver apartment when the past I thought I'd buried came knocking again. Years ago, my parents told me they couldn't help with college, that debt was shameful, that I needed to struggle to learn character. I believed them until the day they showed up asking me to fund my sister's lavish wedding, as if my success existed to fix their pride. In that moment, something inside me snapped into perfect focus. They'd rewritten the rules for her. But this time, I wasn't the obedient daughter they expected. I gave them a reality check they would never forget. My name is Iris, and for most of my life I played the role my family wrote for me. The reliable daughter, the quiet problem solver, the one who didn't ask for much, because asking usually led nowhere. I grew up in a small house just outside Denver where the walls were lined with my mother Helen's framed classroom art projects and my father Thomas's old auto shop calendars. From the outside, we looked like every ordinary American family. But inside, there was a constant unspoken divide. Alina, my younger sister, sparkled at the center, and I learned to shrink around her brightness. It wasn't always malicious. It was subtle, 1,000 tiny moments that told me where I stood. When I brought home straight A's, Mom said, "That's wonderful, Iris," without looking up from the dinner pot. When Alina showed up with a last-minute dance trophy, the whole living room transformed into a celebration. Dad would pull out his phone call, relatives brag like she'd won the Olympics. I learned early that approval wasn't something I could earn. It was something Alina simply had. By the time I reached senior year, I thought maybe college would be my chance to rewrite my own story. I still remember the morning I got my acceptance letter into a cybersecurity program. The seal wasn't even broken when I burst into the kitchen, breathless proud in a way I hadn't been in years. For a few minutes, I let myself imagine they'd be excited for me, maybe help me take the next step. Instead, Helen dried her hands on a towel, exchanged a look with Thomas, and said, "Honey, now that you're 18, you'll need to figure out college on your own." Thomas added, "We didn't get handouts. You shouldn't either." I asked about co-signing a loan. Helen pursed her lips. "Debt is degrading. People use loans as a shortcut. You need to learn resilience." That word resilience carved itself into me like a warning. I spent the next 4 years working 3 jobs, falling asleep over textbooks in cold dorm rooms, eating whatever I could prep for $5 a day. The only people who showed up for me were my grandparents, Eldon and Margaret, who quietly drove me to a bank in Grand Junction and co-signed my loans without a single condition attached. Opportunity isn't a sin, Grandpa told me as we signed the papers. And neither is needing help. Eventually, I graduated, built a career, and carved out a life that felt solid and mine. A life where I didn't need to tiptoe around someone else's ego. But every time I visited my parents' house, the old dynamics slipped back into place. Alina floated on cushions of compliments. I sat in the background, the daughter who turned out fine, as if fine was all I'd ever been allowed to be. I thought distance would protect me. I thought success would put all of that behind me. But when Helen and Thomas came to my door asking for $75,000 for Alina's lavish wedding, I finally understood something. My history with them wasn't a closed chapter. It was a fuse waiting to be lit. The request came on a Tuesday evening, the kind of quiet night when the city lights outside my window looked almost soft. Helen and Thomas sat stiffly on my couch, hands folded like they were preparing for a performance rather than a conversation. I should have known then my parents only sat like that when they wanted something big, something impossible. "We need your help," Helen began, her voice syrup-sweet in a way that made my stomach tighten. "Your sister's wedding. Well, it's becoming quite the event." Thomas cleared his throat. "Julian's family is used to a certain standard. We've already committed to the venue and decorations, but the costs are higher than expected." I waited. Then Helen said it. "We were hoping you could contribute. $75,000 should cover the remaining expenses." For a moment, the room lost its sound. Their faces held expectation as if this were reasonable, natural, the obvious duty of a daughter who turned out fine. I stared at them, waiting for the punchline. It didn't come. "Let me get this straight," I said. "You refused to co-sign a small student loan so I could attend college, but now you expect me to fund a luxury wedding." Helen blinked, genuinely offended. "That was different. College debt would have hurt you. This is about family." Family. Funny how that word only surfaced when they needed something. Alina hadn't spoken to me in years, not since the Thanksgiving meltdown she orchestrated in my apartment, mocking my furniture, my neighborhood, even a family recipe I cooked to feel close to my grandmother. She'd stormed out after I finally defended myself, and our relationship flatlined on the spot. Now she wanted a ballroom full of imported flowers and crystal towers of champagne. And somehow I was the one expected to make that dream happen. I didn't answer right away. I wanted to think, to breathe, to dig through the years of pressure until I found my own voice beneath it. But my silence was enough for Thomas. "Iris," he said, leaning forward, "you make good money. You can afford this." There, it was the truth they'd rehearsed. My success didn't belong to me. It belonged to their image. After they left, the phone calls started. First, "Nora, sanctimonious as ever, your parents are heartbroken. How could you say no so quickly?" Then, "Colby, you're seriously not helping. You're loaded." Then Riley, "I don't even recognize you anymore." Every call tightened the invisible rope around my ribs. They weren't interested in my side. They wanted compliance, not understanding. But the hardest blow came from a number I didn't recognize. A text. "This is Julian. Your refusal is making things difficult for Alina. Please reconsider for her sake." I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Then I blocked the number. For years, I'd carried the weight of being the reasonable one, the responsible one, the one who absorbed the family's imbalances without protest. But as I stood by my window that night, watching the city pulse below, something shifted. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of disappointing them. I was afraid of losing myself if I didn't act. The silence after I blocked Julian's number felt heavier than the noise that came before it. I sat on the edge of my bed, elbows on my knees, letting everything settle, the old hurt, the new insult, the years I'd spent bending myself into someone they could use. Somewhere along the way, I'd mistaken endurance for love and self-sacrifice for loyalty. That illusion was gone now. For 3 days, I tried to shake it off. I focused on work on lines of code and security reports, anything that didn't involve wedding budgets or family guilt. But the memories kept resurfacing with painful clarity. Thomas's dismissive shrug when I begged for help with college. Helen's lecture about degrading debt. Alina's smug laugh at my Thanksgiving table. Back then, I swallowed it all. Now it burned. On the 4th morning, I opened an old folder tucked behind my desk drawer, payments bills, the remnants of those college years. Not the details, just the reminder. I held one in my hand, tracing the faded ink, feeling again the exhaustion of studying until dawn after a double shift, the cold library floors where I sometimes napped because I couldn't afford to run my heater all night. They had let me drown then. Now they wanted me to build Alina a lifeboat. That was the moment something inside me snapped into alignment, not anger, not revenge, but clarity. Saying no wasn't cruelty. It was correction. It was truth. I drafted a message to Helen and Thomas, short and steady. "I've considered your request. My answer is no. Please don't contact extended family about this again." I didn't hit send. Instead, I closed my phone, grabbed my coat, and drove across town to see Eldon and Margaret. If anyone could ground me, it was them. The moment I stepped inside, my grandmother touched my cheek and said, "You look tired, honey." I broke a little at that, just enough to let the truth out. I told them everything. Eldon listened quietly, his hands folded on the table. When I finished, he nodded once. "Standing up for yourself isn't betrayal," he said. "It's maturity. They won't like it. But that doesn't make it wrong." On the drive home, I realized I didn't need their approval. I needed my own. By the time I pulled into my building's garage, the decision was final. The next time my parents asked for an answer, they wouldn't be speaking to the daughter who stayed quiet. They'd be meeting the woman who finally learned how to say no. I didn't have to wait long for the next confrontation. It came the following Sunday afternoon, a crisp Denver day when the air tasted like cold pine and distant chimney smoke. I'd just finished cleaning my apartment when the intercom buzzed. "I didn't need to check the screen. Some things you feel in your bones." Helen's voice drifted through the speaker. "Iris, honey, we need to talk. It's important. Important always meant urgent for them. Urgent always meant something they wanted. I buzzed them in anyway. When they stepped inside, Helen's eyes scanned my apartment like she was searching for proof I didn't deserve. Thomas avoided looking at me altogether, heading straight to the kitchen counter like he owned the place. They moved with the quiet entitlement of people who had never once questioned whether they were welcome. Helen clasped her hands. We heard you've been overwhelmed. With all the calls. Overwhelmed. Not harassed, not attacked. Overwhelmed. I wasn't overwhelmed, I said. I was disappointed. In us, she asked like that was unthinkable. In everyone. Thomas exhaled sharply. Look, Iris, we know you're upset about the past, but it's time to let that go. This is about your sister's future. There it was, again, my life framed as a footnote to Alina's convenience. I leaned against the arm of my sofa, arms folded. Before we go any further, let's be honest. You refused to help me with college. You made principles out of your fears. You let me work myself raw while insisting it was good for me. And now you want me to pay for Alina's wedding. A lavish wedding. Why? Thomas's jaw tightened. Because it's what's expected. Helen chimed in. Julian's parents are contributing so much. We can't look inadequate. So that was it. Not love, not fairness, not family, appearance. You care more about looking successful than being good parents, I said softly. Helen flushed. That's not true, and frankly I don't appreciate being spoken to like this. Then try hearing me instead of managing me. Her lips pressed into a thin line. We didn't come for an argument, Thomas said. We came for a solution. We need that money, Iris. No, I said. The word landed between us like a dropped stone, small but unstoppable. Helen blinked at me as if she hadn't heard correctly. No, she repeated. No, I said again, calmly. I'm not paying for the wedding. You can afford it, Thomas shot back. That's not the point. Then what is Helen demanded, voice trembling with indignation. I took a slow breath. The point is that you want my success without acknowledging what it cost me. You want financial help without emotional accountability. You want me to fix mistakes you made out of pride, and you want me to pretend they were never mistakes in the first place. Helen's eyes glistened with something sharp anger, not sadness. This is petty, Iris. The word sliced through me. Petty. The same word she'd used years ago when I was drowning beneath schoolwork and debt, and she refused to co-sign a loan that would have changed everything. Except now I was no longer 18. I stepped closer, my voice low and steady. You're calling me petty for refusing something you denied me. When I needed money for college, you said no because you believed struggling would build character. But now, when your favorite child wants a fairy tale wedding, suddenly debt isn't morally wrong anymore. Suddenly, money is a tool, not a sin. Helen looked away. Thomas rubbed the back of his neck. We thought it was the right decision at the time. No, I said. You thought it was the easy decision for you. The room went silent. Even the hum of the heater seemed to hold its breath. Then Helen whispered, You're going to ruin this wedding. I laughed. I didn't mean to, but the sound broke out of me like a release valve. I'm not ruining anything. I'm refusing to enable your bad promises. She swallowed hard. Alina will be devastated. She already was devastated, I said quietly. Long before I said no. You raised her to believe everything should be handed to her, and now the world is correcting her expectations. Helen looked stunned, as if she'd never considered this. Thomas shook his head. We can't go back on our word. Then don't, I said. But don't ask me to live with the consequences of it. Helen stepped forward, voice trembling. What happened to you, Iris? You used to be so sweet. I grew up, I replied. Before they could say another word, the doorbell rang again. I froze. Helen turned toward the door, confused. Did you invite someone else? No, I said, but my stomach twisted. I opened the door. Alina stood there, no designer clothes, no practiced smirk, no entourage of validation buzzing behind her. Just my sister in jeans and a slightly wrinkled sweater clutching her purse with both hands like it was keeping her upright. I need to talk to you, she said, voice quiet. Helen rushed toward her. Sweetheart, we're handling Mom, Alina said, holding up a hand. Please stop. Helen went silent, startled. Alina stepped inside and turned to face me. Her eyes were softer than I'd seen in years. I heard everything she said. And Iris? You're right. The words stunned us all. Even Thomas blinked like he'd misheard. Alina swallowed. I let the wedding get out of control. I let Julian's family overspend, and I let you two. She glanced at our parents, promised things we never could afford. I thought it would make me feel worthy. And instead, it made everything worse. Helen's voice cracked. But, sweetheart, no, Alina said gently. I need to say this. She turned back to me. I treated you terribly. For years. I don't even know why, maybe because it was easier than admitting I was jealous. Or because Mom and Dad made it feel like you were the strong one, the one who didn't need anything. She inhaled shakily. But you did need things. And they never gave them to you. Helen winced. Thomas's gaze dropped to the floor. Alina continued, voice steadier now. I don't want a lavish wedding bought with guilt and pressure. I want something real, something I can walk into without shame. And if that means scaling down, then that's what I'm doing. Helen sputtered. But the Broadmoor is not happening, Alina said. Mom, Dad, stop, please. Then she looked at me. I came here to ask if you'd come to the wedding anyway. Not as a checkbook, as my sister. The room held its breath. Slowly, I nodded. Yes, I'll come. Helen looked like she might argue again, but for once, Thomas placed a hand on her arm. Let it go, he murmured. Alina exhaled relief, softening her shoulders. Thank you, but before she left, she added one more thing. And Iris, that reality check you gave them. A tiny smile appeared. They needed it, more than either of us realized. As the door closed behind her, I stood in the quiet of my apartment, heart pounding with something that felt suspiciously like freedom. For the first time in my life, I hadn't bent. I hadn't folded. I'd stood up straight. And the world, my world, finally shifted with me. 3 weeks later, I found myself standing outside the community center where Helen used to teach, string lights glowing against the early evening wildflowers arranged in mason jars along the walkway. It wasn't the luxury resort my parents had fantasized about, but it felt warm, honest, real. When I walked inside, Alina was waiting near the small makeshift aisle, her dress simple and beautiful, nothing like the designer gowns she used to covet. She smiled when she saw me, a soft, grateful smile that held no competition, no superiority, just sisterhood. Ready, she whispered. For you always, I said. I walked her down the aisle. Guests clapped a gentle wave of affection that felt earned, not staged. Julian looked at her like she was the only person in the room, and for the first time, I believed he wasn't the boy he used to be. My parents never showed. There was a time that would have gutted me, but as I stood beside the newly married couple, surrounded by people who came not for show, but for love, I felt something unexpected, peace, not the kind born from perfection, but from truth, finally settling where it belonged. A week later, Helen and Thomas asked to meet. We sat at a small Starbucks near Dad's store. They looked smaller somehow, less certain, less armored. Helen spoke first. We were wrong, about so much. Thomas nodded. We should have helped you. We should have been proud of you. We're sorry. Their apology didn't erase the past, but it acknowledged it, and that was enough. I'm willing to move forward, I said. But with boundaries. They agreed. As I walked back to my car, the late afternoon sun warming my shoulders, I realized something: justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, and entirely yours. Standing there in the soft Denver light, I understood the truth I'd spent years reaching for. Love isn't measured by what you give up, but by what you refuse to let break you. I didn't fund a lavish wedding, and I didn't repeat the patterns that once hurt me. I chose myself, and somehow that choice brought all of us closer to something honest. If this story resonates with you, share your experience in the comments and subscribe for more family dramas and real-life reckonings. You're not alone.